Okay. All right. John and I will be doing our cost of production study here shortly, but before we get into that, in case you aren't aware of Russell Consulting Group, we provide financial marketing advice exclusively to farmers. We have been for, be going into our 19th year here, and Mo Russell, one of the founders of the company, has always been big about trying to use some analytics to compare customer base. And so over the years we've accumulated quite a bit of data. Mo likes to call it leverage points that every farming operation has. That would be number one being marketing has the most potential. Number two, machinery cost per acre, and closely followed by labor cost per acre. And we like to combine the two because some folks will have more machinery and less labor, and vice versa. So we look at it generally every year after we do a projection. We'll sit down with a farming operation and we'll take their current market value balance sheet, and we'll use a little bit of tax return information, but not to make forward-looking decisions. So when I sit down with the customer, I want to know their projected, at least the big items, the fertilizer, seed, chemicals, and cash rent. And so that's, John will get into the results of that summary for the year. Really, there weren't a whole lot of changes this year. If you look at 2017, machinery cost per acre is up a little bit. Labor cost per acre has essentially been flat for a very long time. And when we combine the two, we bounced around a little bit. Last year it was down, not exactly sure why, but we're back up to more of a combined $170 per acre. That doesn't mean, I mean, that's still an average. That doesn't mean we see some pretty big ranges, and but that goes into the rest of the story. But the other measurement that we like to look at and to try to put things in perspective for people is try to think of your business and why are you doing things. And you know, people farm for return on assets and return on equity. So that would be down considerably from coming off the highs of 2012, which has dropped off on the 5-year here, but we're back up at least this year, and I think it just probably had to do more with a big crop as much as price, because the price certainly hasn't been there. There we go. Okay. I got it. Yeah. So some other measurements we use when we're looking at a person, at an individual farming operation, their financial health, basically. So a big one is working capital divided by annual expenses. You'll see it working capital divided by annual revenue, however you want to measure it. We've seen some slippage there, but we still have, there's still some cash out there, and I've noticed the farm credits in some of the banks of the world are using the working capital per acre as one of their benchmarks as well. And owner's equity has always been a big thing, and so we like to look at that in terms of when a farmer comes to us, asks about should he buy a farm, should he trade equipment. We want to make sure that after they do or make the decision, do they still have enough equity to maintain reasonable risk in their operation. And if they don't, if it takes it too far, it's probably not a good decision. The other part of it that we do is it a good place to put my money? So we'll run a net present value on it as well and combine the two. And they may have some more than one opportunity at a time. So we'll look at that. And also, we, Norm didn't necessarily mention, but Mo Russell and Terry Jones started the company, offered some ownership stake back in 2007, which I bought in. Tom Vincent bought in at that time. And then shortly after that, CHS bought into Russell Consulting Group. And as of a year ago, CHS is 100% owner of Russell Consulting Group today. So Mo is still on contract to do Mo speaking and writing and so forth. I'm still on contract to do this. And so they fully intend to keep Russell Consulting Group as a standalone business within their company. They just want to grow it within the CHS system as well as through the independent contractor as well. So, any questions on our benchmark data?
What are y'all including your working capital?
Current assets minus current liabilities from a market value balance sheet.
Is the labor data, is the labor cost, is that, I guess, does that include management or just labor, hired labor?
By definition, it's labor expense and unpaid labor. And owner's draw, yeah.
Do you track labor hour input per acre versus, so to know whether that's holding flat because the cost per hour is going up, if the hours are down over time? Like, do you standardize the cost of labor?
No, it's you know, we'll get, like I said, I mentioned the tax return, and we'll look at some of the expenses there. But really, I mean, we're trying to do we're trying to combine a lot of things, and so we're really not drilling down that deep. You would need some analytical software to do that, and we're just doing a projection. One thing I didn't mention is we like to, once we have the acres and projected yields and a price, we'll equate it to a gross dollar target for marketing purposes. But it's also combined corn, soybeans, wheat, whatever they're growing. And so what we're going to look at, what John's going to put up here, is pulling that data back out and then trying to line those customers up. So that's the information in front of you. So those numbers came out of our customer base. We're identifying them with their customer number there. So it's all anonymous. But those were the actual input costs, net land costs, and so on and so forth. And then for those individual operations, and then we standardize the price. I'm probably just jumping into your part of it here, John. But in order to do some sort of ranking rather than use the projected price that they used, because that's going to vary quite a bit based on location, basis, etc. We standardize the price and then rank them that way. So I'll just leave it at that, John.
Yeah, so the two data sets you're looking at here, the Russell data set and what you're going to look at, that's the LattaHarris data set, are really constructed. I think Bill was going through that a little bit, really differently. One is the Russell set is a 2017 projection. And Tom, right, in February, March, you're working with your clients and trying to budget forward what they think their costs are going to be in the various categories. And I've worked with the Russell Association over the years to try to help get this kind of a common database. And we've been doing this. But you've really too much data. There's about 50 data points in here that come in from, I think, 4 or 5 different of the consultants. But primarily, and they're identified over on the left if they're by the color of the greater than or less than size, acres-wise, if they're not Iowa, Illinois, if they're Minnesota, or if they're something unusual about the data. There's a couple organic farms in here. that we just try to screen out a little bit, just so you know what's going on. But if you look at the average, and this is, if you look at the ranking clear over on the right, that's their projected income and expense. Of course, if it's, profit and loss. If that's in red, that's a loss. Now, a couple there's at the top are massive losses. Now, I understand that some of those operations they're intercompany, they have potentially and I don't quite understand this, but they're moving the cost into their crop side, so their feed is cheaper. Okay, and a couple of those are maybe have some custom activity going on, so they have additional income coming in, because you could see at $500 an acre loss, how many years could you stay in business? Not very long. But the one thing that I find, and I have found over the last couple of years, I look at this data set, is in the spring of the crop year. There are a number of people that go into the crop year knowing by their own budgeting that they expect to lose money. And what adjustments are made. So I found it very interesting listening to a previous presentation about the things that we're able to do in the future potentially to start to look at optimizing margin instead of optimizing yield. Because I still get this when I talk to a lot of farmers is, well, the only thing I really can control is how much yield I get, so I'm going to fertilize to get, whatever I think the maximum potential is. And of course, you're making that decision before you know what the summer rains are going to be, so that's always a gamble. So it's a constant gamble. But even still, there's so much uncertainty. And if you look at the range of numbers, too, between the two pages, the ones that are showing some profits and marginal profit are on page 2. And granted, these are not at very good grain prices. Did the market offer better prices than this at some point during the year?
Not much better. So, and to sell at the high, sell all at the highest, so
People are now motivated to do that because they don't know it's the high at the time. And Jeannie talked about looking forward to, and you look at these kind of losses, we got to realize something's going to change in them. We were talking about southern corn guys that aren't very good at raising corn. What are their numbers look like? Put better, more profit?
Haven't looked at their numbers.
Interesting.
But they're not spending any money on storage.
You're selling it as it comes on. And that's one number that I've seen, you'll see it in our data set, one number that's really been going up is storage costs.
What's the?
I don't know why. $60, $70 an acre. I mean, holding on to it, yeah, hoping for a better price. So anyway, the Russell data is here for you to look at. I think I'm not sure what it all tells us. I'm not sure what all our data tells us, but there is a huge amount of variation between farms. Since the days I was farming, which was quite a few years ago now, but I always enjoyed listening to audiobook books when I was driving the tractor. I actually had to drive at that time, so I had to have something that I could do that I could still drive, which was I could listen to books on tape. And a book I just read, which I find very related to our subject matter today, is a book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And this book is about success. And I told Jeannie, she was talking about her father and what he went through. And if you read Malcolm's book, he talks about success. We often in the Western world think that success is driven by the fact that you're brilliant or you're smart or something individually makes us highly successful. And his point, as you read through that book, is often success is driven by opportunities that you're presented with. And he talks about Bill Gates and about the Beatles and how a lot of their success was driven by the opportunities. In the Beatles' case, their opportunities when they played in Hamburg for all those years, basically in strip clubs, and all the practice they got. And he talks about getting, you don't ever become really good at anything until you got 10,000 hours of work on something and practice before you get good. So there's things that make people successful that are a lot different than just, oh, they're just so smart, they just did it right. I've had crop farmers a few years ago brag to me how successful they were because of how much money they were making at $7 corn. And, and I said to myself, well, I'm glad you're making lots of money, but I don't know if you can take a lot of credit for that. But as we go through, what are the one things that you guys could do something about? You have very little control over the markets on commercial corn and soybeans. You do have quite a bit of control over your cost structures. You do have some control in marketing if you work with somebody and you do some planning and you do kind of prepare yourself to maybe take advantage of opportunities, but you really don't have a huge amount of control on the revenue side unless you're doing something that's going into a targeted market of some sort. But you do have quite a bit of ability to control costs. So what we've tried to do in the cost of production is organize the data. There's a sample there of the headings, and we try to structure this data so that it groups things into things that you can make a management decision about. We try to look at your seed cost, your fertilizer cost, your chemical cost. Those are all things you can do by your shopping and planning and organizing. We tried, and then we get over to where I think is the biggest opportunity that currently exists, and that's in labor, equipment costs, and fuel. Of course, I throw fuel into that. Because to me, the one thing that I see over and over again that separates operations that are either making more profit or losing less money, however way you want to look at that, is their utilization of the equipment and how well they do that. So I've tried to group people so they got some idea when they do this cost production work what their operations cost per acre, which is labor and fuel and their depreciation on equipment, their interest on borrowed equipment, their repair bills, all lumped together. And that tries to get everybody into some kind of comparable format. So that if you're a participant in our cost production study, so I'm looking at corn costs. And in many cases, many of these data sets are in FBS, and the reason that we have quite a few clients that utilize FBS, but one of the reasons we do that is we can organize the data to get it into a format that we can get the information out much easier. But if you look at operations costs, and you got one at $84, and you've got the highest one in there is maybe at, is it 240, is it 279, 269, huge ranges. The 84, and this is another issue that I kind of wanted to bring, another idea for you to think about. How many of you either perform custom work for somebody or hire custom work done by somebody else? And how many of you set that rate based on Iowa State's surveys? Right here? Have you ever looked at the fine print? There's about 160 cost observations on this report. This data is collected from 152 usable responses. There's not a whole lot of data. This is what somebody thinks their cost of production is, their cost of doing an operation is, or what they have to pay for. It's not based, I used to think for years that somebody at Iowa State, some the engineers got together and they calculated what's it going to cost to run this machine over the field, and it was all this science behind it. It's not. It's just what people report. So again, being able to go back to a cost of production information and be able to start looking at operations costs. We're able, the accountants in our office, we're able to look at those cost numbers and we can say, you know, it's actually costing you on average $120 an acre to do a job, and you're actually able to go hire somebody to do it for 85. And in most cases, those people that are doing it are, where you see that $84 number, somebody's got an operation, a farm operation, and he says to his neighbor, I want you to put my crop in. They're willing to do it at $84 an acre. They probably am costing them way more than $84 an acre to do it. So the situation is that people are willing, because they look at the custom rate surveys. Whenever we've looked hard at the custom rate numbers, excuse me, I need some more. When we ever look hard at the custom rate numbers, we, in general, usually find that what Iowa State is saying and what things are actually costing. Iowa State numbers about half of what they actually cost. So if you're hiring it done, that's good. You know, if you're doing it for somebody else, maybe you're not getting paid enough. But another thing that we found by being able to have data organized like this is that even when you're not covering your cost, let's say you've got extra labor hours, you've got extra machine hours, and somebody wants to hire you to plant their 100-acre farm. If you can do that without hiring more labor or adding more equipment, even the fact that you're not getting paid what it really costs you completely for it, covering your depreciation basically, you're still better off doing that because you're getting cash coming in to help lower your costs. So one of the strategies that I've seen that has worked the best if you're a conventional crop farmer is to either, if you're small enough, just hire it all done by somebody else, because usually they'll do it cheaper than it costs you to do it. And if you have excess capacity, try to market that capacity to somebody else, because you get to lower your cost of production because you're running that equipment and that labor over more acres. Another observation is you'll see on the corn cost is the average, and I ranked them by their average cost of production. The average of this group is 342. University of Illinois, which was in the northern region, said the average of the northern Illinois farms was 337, so very close. And you see Iowa State, and this is more, I can't find an Iowa State number that is based on actual collected information, but this is their published number, is 411. So it looks like for the most part, most of our people are coming in quite a bit lower on a cost standpoint than the Iowa State numbers would project. And you see some people are in, down in the 2s. And, we see a couple, that one up in 5. And I have to say the guy at 512 is actually in another state, and they actually get quite a premium for the crop. So their cost structure is a little bit different there. And they're probably netting more than the 350 over there on the right. So if you turn to the next page, you got the soybeans.
Components of that machinery cost per acre, John. You talked about that a little bit. Take a ride at that.
That is depreciation, book depreciation, or in some cases it's taking a percentage of the value in that inventory, machinery inventory, if they don't have a full book depreciation schedule. It's repair costs, it's cost of shop depreciation, cost of LP in the shop, cost of truck leases, pickup leases, leased equipment. custom hire, that's all rolled up together. The goal is to get the number is what's the cost of the equipment line and the activities to get the crop planted and harvested. Get it to the bin. So trucking costs are adjusted from the field to the bin, and then from bin to harvest is taken out because that's considered a marketing cost, and that helps stabilize the cost productions. So what do you need to do if you're the potential new users here? The biggest thing you need to do is make sure when you're posting your expenses is to put them into a cost category. Okay, so it's going into seed cost. The next step is to use enterprising or whatever to be able to organize your data crop by year. Lots of people fail at cost production, I believe, because they struggle with a couple of concepts. One of them is being a cutoff date. Think about your normal cropping operation. You'll start putting expenses in the 2018 crop. How soon? In what, 2 months? You'll start fertilizing, you'll start doing activities that actually affect the 18 crop in 2018, and you might buy seed. In most cases, a lot of people buy seed in November and December of 17 for the 18 crop. In 18, you'll return some of that seed you didn't need, and often there's a lot of swapping going on because the seed you thought you bought isn't available, and so you get something different. So there's a huge turnover going on what exactly it is. I see bills from seed corn companies, and I have trouble understanding exactly what you're paying for because there's so much in and out activity going on, so that's going on. And then during 2018, that crop is incurring other costs. You've got you have to go on and spray something on in August that you didn't expect to do because of some kind of challenge on it. So you got that cost. That crop you may sell in 18. You may not. You may have selling a lot of crop in 18 that was actually harvested in 17. You get to the end of 18 and it starts over again. And this year it's something different. So the strategies, so the key components of trying to track your costs when you're writing your check and paying your invoice is what crop for what year. Accrual accounting, perfect accrual accounting would be, let's say you had a 1,000-acre corn farm and that's all you had was corn. And you bought all your crop, you bought all of your expenses in 17 and you harvested the crop and sold it all in 17. You could have a pretty good idea of looking at your checkbook and tell you what you made, your net or costs, and divide by the bushels you produce what your cost per bushel is. But it never happens that way. So the core concepts of cutoff date, which would be, in our world, we like to use 12/31 into the year, especially for cropping because it's an annual crop. So 12/31, what's my inventory? So how much corn do I have on hand? How much beans did I have on hand at the beginning of the year? What fertilizer have I already put on the field that's actually for the next year's crop? What inputs have I already purchased? So as accountants, when we ask for that information, they say, well, it's a struggle sometimes to get that exact data. But it's really key to get that. Your data system then has to be able to help you organize that. From a tax basis, you buy that fertilizer in 17 that you're not going to use until 18, but it's a tax deduction in 17. So that's another reason that, frankly, FBS is a really great job because you can keep that tax basis going. You can buy that crop that input in 17. And you actually don't, from an accrual standpoint, you really don't want to expense that until 18. So you've got to be, the accountants are not in their head that, yeah, that's exactly how you do it, but that's not a natural. People don't think about that, but you need to think about when is this expense, what crop is it related to, and I want to get it linked up. So that's a struggle that people have that if you can get on top of, it's a big advantage.
John, I'll put a plug in for FBS here. You should have the scanner interface so that in September, October, November, when you're buying that, you scan that document. And the person putting it in, if you're looking at it in April, May, you don't need to go to some file and try to find that piece of paper. FBS, really explains the document to that very well, and it's easy to kind of keep going. So if you're not using that.
That's, and the scanner interface works well, but just collecting those documents and getting them into the system and linking them to that transaction is a huge advantage of being able to look back and see what information is.
Traditional corn and soybean operation, we look at August to September period, cutoff date is one better system.
It's complicated. You could do that, but you often, in some years, it varies so much about what you're trying to do from a tax wise. It may be varying by what you've got going on financially. The robustness of good accounting systems should accommodate. Because at the end of the day, when you're done and you've got a good set of accrual books, when you look at your accrual net income, by definition, that should be expenses that occurred for that period to make that revenue. So they should be matched up. So what your year end is, it can make it easier or not depending on what's going on, but that's probably not something you need to have to deal with. So a lot of times people say, should we do a June 30th financial report, income statement for a cropping operation? If accrual is done right, June 30th basically has no expenses because the expenses are all capitalized into that inventory, that growing crop. So, a mid-year statement on a crop farm, a commercial Iowa, Illinois crop farm, doesn't tell you an awful lot. It tells you what you got invested in that crop coming up. One thing too that we are beginning to find more and more is that to be more forward-looking instead of looking back. This cost of production is 2016. We were 8 months into that year. It's okay to look back and say to yourself, how did I stack up in that period against the other people in the study? But what you really, I think you need to do is into July, you need to say, what is my cost in the crop that I have grown in the field? Really roll it up. Because at this stage, by 1st of August, you've got a pretty good idea what your crop might be. You don't know for sure what the yield is, but you start to get a pretty good idea. So before you go into that end of August timeframe when you have to renew leases, you have to make purchase decisions about inputs, you have to think about marketing, whatever you don't already have marketed. It's really nice to know what you've got in your cost. How often do you guys run the financials?
Every month.
Every month. And if you try to do every month in a system not as robust as FBS, pretty damn hard to do.
It is nice that you said, in June, we know exactly what we got invested, so we can inform, what we got left as far as the herbicide, you can estimate that. You always know.
So the big challenge, and Norm, you may want to talk about what you guys are at with this now, but I think is going forward is budgeting. Being able to do a solid budget out 1 year in advance. And I know that you have some capabilities built into FBS currently, but, that's one challenge I would give to FBS is to really continue to work on that forward-looking on a solid budgeting model that ties into the whole system.
And you need to do that on a rural basis because you've got prepaid, a whole bunch of other things that don't necessarily match the county.
So another thing that we're doing now too, because FBS, and I think Ken, you've recognized this, is a very robust database. And there's a lot of very good information there. So we've actually, because some of the budgeting we need to do is, we need to get into more complexity than we are able to get out of what's in the standard code. Is where actually Bob does a lot of this. This is our Krogmeyer back here on the back row is a CPA at our firm, and he specializes in data. So we're actually grabbing data sets out of FBS and putting them into models so that we can use it to model out going into the future. And so some of that can get built into the code over time, but right now all that data is available. And that is really useful. And I think, I'm going to change topics here, but I know we got a number of crop data companies here. To me, the biggest challenge that I have that I feel most uncomfortable with as far as the next biggest cost after inputs is that machinery cost area. And trying to understand that machinery cost number better than we currently are. Because I got a pretty good idea of what it is for the farm. I have much less confidence in the number. In fact, the number we use in the model, it's the same cost per acre for corn as it is soybeans. And we know in reality it isn't. You use some different machines, you have different processes. But in most cases, we can't capture, or there's not systems out there that are capturing enough activity data that we can then move into some kind of cost model. At least that maybe it exists at Cropzilla. I don't know that you guys are doing this stuff, but if we could actually start to get a little better understanding on how that costs. And I know you guys are, everybody's kind of
Got some of that.
got pieces of it are starting to come together.
I mean, that's a good segue into the next session that I set up to John.
All right, so we're ready to roll on?
So incredible amount of work goes behind these and putting these things together. So not just producers, John Crunchy and Russell. So let's get them in hand.